Hello everyone, Ultimate Steve here, and welcome to another entry in the Kerbal Space Program Space Combat series, which will very soon be getting a better name once the next major arc starts. First of all, there's no combat in this episode, just going to be me flying a bunch of ships, and that's because going forward, I kind of want to do the logistics side of things more. Like previously, I was just teleporting ships and then making them battle, but no, I want to launch them, I want to maneuver them. I don't want to teleport them into place. As much as possible, I would like to repair them after the battle is over. Now, granted, I'm going to regret saying that because it's going to be real tedious. But the first part of that is that the RXC Halberd, the oldest ship in the fleet, our rescue ship, is going around and picking up all of the survivors, rescuing the Rockomax survivors and, well, capturing the Kerbadine survivors, because Kerbadine hasn't bothered to pick them up himself for some reason. And they've just left this cabin right here, that one in particular, that is the defense fighter cockpit from the KD Quasar, the battle cruiser, and the pilot claims to have information on the super weapon. Anyway, a very good thing is happening. Also, by the way, I lost some of the footage here. So there's like one or two rescues I didn't get on screen. But something really good has happened, is that there is a lot of survivors to this battle. So many, in fact, that the Halberd is actually run out of seats. So the LRF-2 here, it has enough fuel to carry the defense fighter cockpit home with it to, like, do an extra seat. But we are still one seat overloaded. So I believe what ends up is we end up docking to the wreckage of one of the Sharkies. And bringing that home as well. So there's two more Kerbals to rescue than we have seats, so we just dragged two of the wreckages home with us. Anyway, the Daltonic Z1 had previously departed Minmus in a hurry and ended up departing in the wrong direction. So its trajectory is being corrected. It'll be the last ship to get home from this battle. And while we were doing this, the Kerbadine forces, the three remaining Kerbadine ships, including the freighter ship that was suspected of having left earlier, but that was actually in error, are seen leaving the Minmus system at a very high velocity. Now, it is great to see that Kerbadine are sticking to their pledge of demilitarizing the Minmus system for the time being, at least free of advanced ships. But weirdly enough, they exited really fast. Our long-range radars actually lost track of them, so we have no idea where they're going. But, well, at least they're not here. Minmus is ours for the time being. So, flying around doing the last couple of rescues, as I said, we docked the Halberd to the wreckage of one of the Sharkies. We'll get to analyze that. We won't get to know very much about that, of course, because it's like, a fighter that's just for sale on the market. Not even a modern fighter. It's pretty old, all things considered. But anyway, so all of the survivors have been rescued or captured, and now the ships are beginning to return to Kerbin. Now this is the RXC Poe, I believe, one of the three Edgar-class interceptors that were all sadly destroyed in the Battle of Minmus Part 2. The pilot here has had enough fuel to return to Kerbin in his wreckage. I'll go to Kerbin, I believe. The preview and shotcut is a little bit low resolution and blurry, so if I'm not reading that correctly, then whatever. So he's just aerobraking his ship down to the surface of Kerbin, and he's going to bail out. Rockomax is not in a great position right now. Yes, they have cleared their rivals out of the system, like Ionic is sanctioned to death and Kerbadine is nowhere to be found, but they don't really have enough ships yet left to, face the general low-level pirate threats. Like, the loss of the Edgar-class interceptors has been a major blow. Like, all three interceptors have been lost, and Rockomax does not really have very many actual combat-capable ships at this time. They sent them all to Minmus, aside from a few that cannot go to Minmus. So they don't really have enough firepower to enforce their trade at this point, which is not great. And worse, like the Edgar, Allen, and Poe were like a batch of three. I believe C7 has already dedicated the production line to something else. Like, it was a strictly one-time thing. Rockomax doesn't currently have any long-range fighters that are operational as of this moment, and, they're going to work on that. He bails out at the last minute, and realizes he didn't have to bail out because somehow the whole thing survived him in the water. But whatever. Anyway, so this is the LRF-1, Rockomax's homegrown fighter design based on the Close-In Fighter 1 defense fighter. It is not a very good fighter. It turns out when you slap something, you basically slap a tiny bit of armor onto something that was meant to be short range and is outdated already, and slap more fuel tanks on it too, it doesn't really make a good fighter. But nonetheless, this fighter does survive in a condition where it could theoretically be reloaded and rearmored and refueled and fight again. But Rockomax jury is out on if they want to do that or not. Now, the RXC Halberd, carrying one of the wreckage of the Sharkies and most of the survivors of the battle in tow, is aerobraking down to a low Kerbin orbit. The Halberd class was never really designed for aerobraking, because it's got non-retractable solar panels on there. It was envisioned as a ship that would basically just go around Kerbin orbit and maybe also transport crew to and from the moons with refueling. It was never really meant to be this thing that went everywhere and did everything and a bunch of rescues without refueling. It's doing all right in that role, because Rockomax didn't really have time to build something dedicated for that role. Because again, most of the ships you're seeing here, like most of the early ships in this timeline, are modified transport ships that hastily strapped weapons to when war broke out. Anyway, now you see the LRF-2 long-range fighter Mark II entering low-carbon orbit through aerobraking with the defense fighter pilot and the intelligence intel. The Halberd has to undertake a second aerobraking pass as well. It's also pretty slow going because the solar panel, the one solar panel the Halberd has left, really wants to melt, because again, this thing was not designed for aerobraking in the slightest, and it really does not have the range to be like, going to Minmus doing a bunch of operations, even with the fuel it stole from the wrecked ships that it rescued the crew from, and it's pushing a whole half of a Sharky with it. So yeah, it was not meant for this, and it really shows. So it's gently can barely brave the heat, even at 52 kilometers. And after that second airbraking pass, the pilot just decides, okay, you know what? They can launch as a fuel tanker. I don't care. I'm just going to burn the rest of the fuel I have to get into orbit. And they do have a little bit of fuel remaining, enough to conduct basic maneuvers. The Zaltonic Z1 then proceeds to enter low carbon orbit. I believe it takes 2 passes for this one. It would have been just 1, as it's so light now. But unfortunately, most of the solar panels have been destroyed. Well, half of the solar panels have been destroyed. So that significantly limits the throttle of the Z1 fighter. It also doesn't help that initially it was coming in on the night side. It really couldn't burn as early as it would have liked. And it also doesn't help that most of its batteries are destroyed. The Z1 survived with most of its core systems intact, but it would take a lot of work to get this one up and running again. But Zaltonic, for first new fighter manufacturer to enter the scene in quite a while. So while Rockomax is mixed on the performance of how this fighter performed, they're very excited to see a new party enter the scene. So they don't have to. Their choices are C7 SSTOs, in building their own fighters which are not very advanced yet, or buying from Jebediah's junkyard. Anyway, so we've got all these people in orbit, so let's go bring them all back down to Kerbin. Valentina Kerman is flying a Sabre multi-role SSTO, again, designed and built by C7 Aerospace, of course, naturally, and she is going to go rendezvous with the Halberd and pick up 9 of the survivors, because that's all the seats they have. And again, it's a good problem to have. Too many survivors, so you have to do multiple trips. The Sabre is a conventionally powered SSTO. There's no nuclear engines on it. And of course, we're going to see all the docking, the orbital ballet, and some of the fuel from the Sabre. There's a auxiliary fuel tank in the Sabre's cargo bay that used to refuel the Halberd a little bit. It's not going to refill it all the way because the Halberd's fuel tanks are deceptively large. But yeah, you can see 9 of the survivors, 8 people from the Halberd and the 1 Kerbidine Sharky pilot getting transferred over. The fuel gets transferred over. I believe I cut that part out. And the Sabre re-enters Kerbin's atmosphere. This one is a fairly normal descent. The Sabre is a mature design that has flown several times before in service for Rockomax, and it's fairly routine to get it down to Kerbin, although Valentina does overshoot slightly and has to fly inverted a little bit. And it's always tricky judging exactly where to deorbit to land your SSTOs. Valentina briefly considers diverting to the island airport, but ends up conducting a large turn to land on the Kerbal Space Center runway. This is critical because Rockomax is very eager to know the eyewitness accounts of what happened up there, get the Allied pilots debriefed, and the enemy pilots gently interrogated. We don't torture them or anything. And touchdown. The Sabre has landed back on Kerbin, and passengers, the prisoners, and the rescued Allied pilots are being transferred directly to the administration building for debrief, effective immediately, not even bothering to stop on the runway. Valentina overshoots her parking spot very slightly, but it's pretty centered left to right, so I'd call that a win. Miri Kerman, another pilot, goes back up in the Sabre pretty much right after the crew has been dropped off to rescue the other 2 crew members that are in orbit. And this one is going to go a lot faster. I edited most of this out, of course, but I get a bit aggressive transferring the fuel on this one, because I really wanted to refuel the Halberd without sending another dedicated tanker mission up there, because those are expensive, those are time-consuming. But unfortunately, what happened is we were controlling from the back docking port and accidentally burned prograde instead of retrograde, and we did not have enough fuel to burn back retrograde. So even with some getting out and pushing, it still took ages to actually re-enter. So you can see we are actually doing a little bit of a slightly uncontrolled roll there to not waste our electricity, and we'd like go through the upper atmosphere like the better part of like half the entire planet's circumference, slowing down very, 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 very slowly. So we were kind of hoping we could catch the Kerbal Space Center, like go an entire another pass around, but it was not to be, and we ended up somewhere around Crater Rim, and you almost couldn't really get further away from the Kerbal Space Center. Miri Kerman, undaunted, tries to find a flat piece of land, and honestly, she probably could have used the fuel to find a more flat piece of land, but she comes across this little shoreline here and attempts a landing here. And just as the sun sets over the horizon, and just as the batteries die, so she can't use her landing lights, so she finds it a little bit hard to judge, and unfortunately the Saber has been knocked out of service temporarily due to its starboard wing coming off, but it's repairable. So now Rockomax has a problem. They have no fighters. Every fighter they have is damaged at least, or that's more thing. So there's the LRF-1, which is outdated and would need a complete arm overhaul and complete weapons overhaul and refueling, and it's a terrible fighter design. There's the Zaltonic Z1, which is very expensive, and we don't own it, but Zaltonic is willing to sell it to us at a discount because they don't want to repair it themselves. We would need to launch new weapons for it, new armor, we need to refuel it, and Xenon, like Ion fighters are cool, but they are very expensive to operate and fuel. There's also the LRF-2, which is pretty much a given that we're going to repair it, given that it is the most modern fighter we own, which is not saying much. A Sharky would probably still beat this any day, but it would need minor work, like just armor and weapons. And of course there's the Halberd. We may decide to give this one better solar arrays. And then, of course, there is the Sharky we captured, which, why would we build half a Sharky for scratch when we can get them for as inexpensive as they are? So after Rockomax upper management sits around a bit and decides what they're going to do, they believe the first order of business is that they want to get the LRF-2 and the Zaltonic Z1 up to fighting shape. They represent the best chance of getting combat-capable readiness quickly. So they go ahead and purchase the Z1 from Zaltonic, who are happy to oblige, and they launch a vehicle on board a new SSTO called the Advanced Transport 1, or AT-1. Unfortunately, this is only its second flight. The first flight was delivering the fuel can in the previous battle, and it kind of spun out of control a little bit on ascent due to the floppy nature of the payload inside, but it does manage to recover. I was kind of worried. It has plenty of fuel margin because it was originally designed to launch an orange tank into orbit. Well, I mean, they're not orange 100% of the time anymore. You can tell how long I've been playing KSP. I still call them orange tanks. But yeah, it has enough fuel margin to recover because this payload is significantly lighter. Now, this payload is a little bit of a repair sled thing. I haven't really named it. This and the AT-1 SSTO both need better names, so comment down below if you have any ideas. This little repair sled thing is designed to take parts and fuel to a vehicle to repair it. The payload will change each flight. The system is designed to be fully reusable, so you should be able to launch them without very much expense. So the first target is the Halberd. The only reason we're stopping here is, one, to refuel it slightly, and those Halberd fuel tanks are deceptively large. I was trying my best to not have to send a dedicated tanker mission, but those fuel tanks, even though they aren't really enough for the Halberd's job, are just huge. But the other reason is we want to replace the solar arrays with retractable versions, because we're going to lean into this thing aerobraking. Like, if it's going to be in service for a while, and all indications say it is going to be in service for a while, we really want it to be able to survive aerobraking in order to save on Delta V. Now, unfortunately, we cannot detach the broken panel, because apparently you can't detach, like, broken panels. You have to repair it and then remove it, unfortunately. So we're going to be carrying around that bit of dry mass, but we take the other panel and we have some fun with it. Like, we can't, like, collapse it in the bay. We don't want to leave orbital debris, so we smash into it to make it smaller, which I guess leaves more orbital debris. Now, I didn't notice this, but this actually takes out most of the repair sled's solar panels, which is not exactly ideal. I play around with fuel transfer, trying to get a reasonable amount of fuel in both ships before I say, okay, we're done, we're leaving. The ship's next target is the LRF-2, which also is carrying the defense pilot, the KDF-1 defense pilot from the KD Quasar, who has the intelligence. But first of all, we are going to restock the ammunition on this ship. So we fire the remaining ammunition. And these missiles, these Dorado missiles, which were named, like, for Doritos, but I couldn't call them Doritos because that would sound stupid, because I have a triangle on the front. These are a derivative of the earlier ultralight missiles, which did not feature a structural piece, which was designed for like light ships to pirate deterrent. Now arming the original version of the missile ended up being like not great. Like why was it designed to be reloadable? If you had to fire them, you were kind of screwed anyway because they ended up being completely worthless missiles. So this is actually the first time in real life, maybe not in like lore, but like this is the first time in real life I've actually reloaded this type of weapon before, and it went surprisingly smoothly, but it is a lot more difficult than the typical weapons where you just like you have a 1.25 meter docking port to play with. After this, the center weapons mount is also docked. I kind of missed that. And the armor is repaired. This is very simple. I believe it's just like 1 or 2 wing pieces. But the problem is that the ship is rotating, and when you like hold the rotation button, the part like doesn't rotate at the same rate as the ship, so everything ends up horribly misaligned. So I end up switching back to the repair sled and telling Vectab to kill rotation, so I have a stable platform with which to attach the armor. I did not bring up a spare solar panel because honestly the solar panel that's missing is not a really big deal. But after this point, I believe that's it. I undock and I go to the next step. You'll notice that the LRF-2's rear docking port is very deeply recessed inside the spacecraft, so I had to offset the docking port in order to get to dock, because otherwise it wouldn't fit. And that's something that kind of comes back to bite me a few times, and eventually I believe I end up fixing that permanently. So the KDF-1 defense pilot is coming willingly and docks to the ship after we reconfigure the docking ports a little bit, and we'll be coming back to Kerbin on this mission with this AT-1 flight. So the repair sled has done all it can do on this mission. It's not like the only mission it's going to do today. I believe we launched this a total of 3 times, just there's that much cargo. Docks back in the payload bay and returns to Kerbin. On re-entry, I am pumping fuel forward because on previous flights, the one previous flight, there was an issue with it flipping out of control. And yep, there we are again, flipping out of control once more. I think I recover, and I pump even more fuel forward, but I believe after this mission, I redesigned the ship so that the wings were spaced a little bit differently. Now, there is a bit of a problem here, is that I end up overshooting the Space Center considerably, so I have to do a really wide turn to get back to base. That's the one thing about like these Mark III SSTOs, like they're so heavy for the drag they produce compared to like other SSTOs I fly, so they just keep on going, so like you can like extremely undershoot and you still end up overshooting. Like take it right here, we're still going like 200 meters per second and we still have like a kilometer of altitude to bleed off, or however much it is. I don't know how synced it is with the video, and just keeps floating down the runway. It just keeps going and going. I eventually have to fire up the engines and do a go around and fly all the way back. So anyway, repair strategy. The LRF-2 and the Z-1 are reasonably-ish long-range fighters. Not the LRF-2, like you have to attach a booster for that. But they can, in a pinch, go out and respond to threats fairly quickly and maintain a somewhat credible pirate deterrent until they can get a more permanent fleet in the air. So the second launch is more focused on the Z-1. In fact, probably like entirely focused on the Z-1, I think. The Z-1 requires like basically 2 dedicated launches because of just how broken it is. So the first mission is dedicated to repairing the armor and also the weapons loadouts. So the Z-1 uses non-standard weapons mounts. They have the .625 meters with 2 missiles on it each, and they did not perform fairly well in the first battle it was used in. Granted, it was up against a Quintessence, which was pretty strong, all things considered. So we're waiting on the jury to see, like, are these missiles bad because they have a docking port in the front, or are these missiles bad because they were up against a Quintessence? Either way, they proved to be quite bad in the annoyingness to redock part. Like I had to do 6 separate dockings with these missile platforms instead of like the 1.5 it would be for like equivalent 1.25 meter missile racks. They do look really cool, but they are also insanely annoying to redock. So their usefulness is still being evaluated, but it's probably not worth it, and we'll probably switch back to 1.25 meter mounts anywhere those are practical, because interchangeability of ammunition is a big deal. This fighter survived its encounter with the frigate it went up against, but it just ran out of ammunition, and there was plenty of ammunition. In fact, we were wasting ammunition towards the end, so Kerbin wouldn't get their hands on it. So interchangeability of ammunition is a very big deal for future battles going forward. It will definitely be a consideration into what we build. Or maybe, and if 0.65 meter weapons prove to be like the meta, or like something that we're going to want to do, then we want to actually stock them in our supply ships so that we can do it. And maybe we can even launch adapters as well, so in case we run out of one type of ammunition, the ships exclusively armed with that type of ammunition can resume operations with a different type of ammunition in a pinch. So in that time, I've transferred some fuel over to the Z1, and I'm beginning to repair its armor. Well, not me, Tedrai there is doing all the hard work. I'm just taking all the credit. This is a bit less neat than the LRF2 armor, but there is a lot more of it in my defense. In Tedrai's defense. Tedrai made it, not me. So the armor is fixed. You can sort of tell it's not brand new. Like I did forget like one of the side armor panels, but that's not a huge deal. Anyway, I go back to the halberd and transfer a little bit more fuel into it, but then I realize that the LRF2 is in a bit of a worse fuel situation. The problem with the LRF2 is that it's in a very inclined orbit compared to the rest of the spacecraft, and it does not really have the fuel to get there. And you see here, another thing of what I'm talking about, is that docking port is so recessed that it's incredibly hard, so I just have to offset the docking port up. Like it's so back there, you need a protruding docking port to dock to an LRF2, which is one of its biggest design flaws, in my opinion. Which, you know, if its biggest design flaw is that, then it's actually probably pretty good, all things considered, because like all of Rockomax's previous self-built fighters had probably even bigger design flaws. So I fool around with transferring as much fuel as I can into it in like even batches to keep it balanced. And oh no, on my way back to the AT1, I accidentally smash into it, and I'm panicking. I'm like trying to figure out what's the damage. Okay, we just knocked the one of the front wings off, one of the canards off, which is not good for re-entry. So it's thought like, could we launch a rescue mission? But it's decided in the end that the best goal, or like the one we're going to try this time, is we're going to move the control surfaces further up to get some control authority in the pitch axis and not lose that. And then we're just going to stuff the other wing in the cargo bay so it's mostly symmetrical. And then we're going to pump all of the fuel backwards to account for the more rearwards center of lift. Like, I was like, because I had fixed the wings by this point to fix the center of mass, center of lift issue. So I was like, oh no, and now I'm going to need to pump fuel backwards in order to be stable. But in a second, we're going to see that is not exactly the right call. So I'd try to significantly undershoot the space center this time, but it doesn't work. The plane just keeps going. It's a brick. It'll keep going. Like drag doesn't work on this thing apparently. So here I am flying inverted to try and get our landing site a bit closer to the space center and not overshoot again. And here I go into like almost a flat spin. Oh, actually no, that's probably like sort of closer to a full flat spin. I pumped some fuel forwards because that was the stability issue there. And in that spin, I actually lose enough speed that I do have to turn on my engines to get back to the space center. So yeah, with that, the Z1 is not quite up to full fighting strength. It needs one more mission, because if you remember, we lost a bunch of batteries, and that really hampers its range. So we're coming into land here in the AT1. Another successful repair, mostly successful repair mission. We're learning a bit. We're damaging the planes a little bit each time, but it's a lot less expensive than launching a whole new fighter every time they break. Here's the third launch. I am definitely speeding way through this one, just to save a bit of your time here, because it gets a little bit repetitive after a while. And there is the repair sled. We accidentally undocked it without anyone in it. It does not have a probe core, which is actually kind of a bit of an oversight. It should probably have a probe core. It flies over to the the Z1, the telling Z1, and undocks its big stack of batteries that we added the docking port for earlier, and the Z1 successfully docks to it. It's probably not the greatest idea having the reaction wheel on the front of all those floppy parts, so we probably should flip it around. And it wasn't quite long enough. I didn't add enough batteries, so the docking port on the front is a little bit recessed, but it's good enough to dock to the sled. We'll see about things in the future. And at this point, we finished the Xenon refueling operation that we started on the previous mission. Xenon is actually insanely expensive, and ion technology is actually insanely expensive, looking back at it. But, you know, perhaps Zeltonic is really good at ion technology and can produce it cheaper than anyone else. And maybe that'll make ion fighters affordable to us. At this point, the solar panels are reattached, and we tinker around a little bit with the best placement. Because the original placement is good at certain orientations, but not all of them. So I believe we add one solar array to the bottom side of the C1 to get a little bit better angles, and maybe, just maybe, offer the cockpit a little bit more protection. Because the Z1 does have a weakness, is that the cockpit is somewhat exposed on the bottom and the top too, but there's a bubble bubble canopy there, so there's a bit more of an excuse. So it is not the most well-protected fighter on the planet, or off the planet, I guess. At this point, I bring the repair sled back over to the LRF2, and I get really fed up with the protruding docking port, and I do my best to try and I put a reaction wheel in that spot so that it'll stick out a bit further. But the problem is the attach node just disappears for some reason. I've never had this bug on EVA construction, and I do EVA construction quite a bit. So I load the quick save, and the attach node shows back up, fortunately. The reaction wheel will only attach at certain orientations, and I do have to offset the docking port very slightly in order to get to stick out by like for sure far enough. But in the end, it works. And to give a little bit of more of a longer docking port base, I moved the Xenon tank up onto the top of the lander can there, just so we absolutely would not have any problems docking. And I moved the giant fuel can from the that refueled the Halberd in the previous battle, like before the second part of the Battle of Minmus, over here for definitely refill the LRF2, and that actually stays docked to act as its transfer stage, because the LRF series of fighters needs a transfer stage in order to get anywhere beyond low carbon orbit. The LRF1, it's decided that we're not going to fix this. It's not worth it. I would not send my worst enemy to pilot an LRF1. They're so outdated. They're so terrible. But they glide really well, and we're actually able to splash this one down intact. So perhaps it'll be able to get into a museum. At that point, the repair sled returns to the AT1 one final time, and we now have two Rockomax instead of 0 operational combat ships that are capable of reaching beyond low carbon orbit. We now have 2, plus the rescue ship is back at full strength, I believe. I don't know if it for sure got refueled or not, I forget, but that's definitely a lot of a better position than Rockomax was in before we started this repair effort. So with the credible deterrent to pirates reestablished, Rockomax can once again focus on his future endeavors. Now, Rockomax, we were building a giant fleet to confront Kerbodyne, but Kerbodyne's kind of collapsed, and that fleet's rather expensive. So, of course, the upper management is trying to cut budgets where they can, and it's looking like most of that fleet will never get built, which is a shame because we were planning a battleship, we were planning a carrier, a bunch of cruisers. The Explorer 2 was going to be the first of many, of course. But it's looking like, with the system at peace, that will never happen. Now, on this previous landing of this ship, I noticed the braking around at the end of the runway was really short, so this should have been a go-around, but I'm like, no, I can absolutely land this. I can absolutely stop before the end of the runway, because the brakes are really powerful. And the brakes are really powerful, but not quite powerful enough. I skid off the edge of the runway, and technically the back wheels are still on the raised part of the runway, but anyway, I call that a successful mission. Yeah. Any landing you can walk away from, and any landing where you can use the ship again, and you can definitely use the ship again after this one. So, what's next for Rockomax? It's probably going to be fairly boring for the foreseeable future. Kerbodyne is absent, Ionic is sanctioned to death and will not be building any ships anytime soon, and the pirates are now freshly deterred, so they can go back to doing what they do best, mining the moons and making a whole bunch of money to increase shareholder value. Though the various generals of the Rockomax Space Force are arguing to at least complete a portion of that huge fleet that was meant for use against Kerbodyne, just in case a large threat pops up someday. Because the entire reason why the conflict with Kerbodyne was so, such a surprise, is that nobody had built proper combat ships in a while. Nobody was maintaining a force of combat ships. Rockomax went into the battle with a bunch of modified STOs and modified cargo transports, and Kerbodyne showed up with dedicated combat ships. Now granted, Kerbodyne lost most of those battles, due to a combination of factors, but Rockomax leadership a lot more comfortable having at least some semblance of long-range deterrent or long-range combat capability that's not simply just 2 fighters in low carbon orbit. But that is most definitely for a future episode. Rockomax is very much looking forward to this hopefully long period of peace.